I'm hopeful that what we talked about last time on Matthew 18 and this whole process that Jesus gave us a template for on dealing with when a brother sins against, or a brother or sister sins against us. It's not as squeaky clean sometimes as I think a lot of people want it to be. Because I've often heard people, preachers primarily, go, oh, it's just, you just need to Matthew 18 them. Okay. you better ponder it, pray about it, think it through, maybe even check with somebody that you believe to be wise. And then, without any kind of transitional statement or thought, Matthew takes us right in on verse 18 to another deal. I tell you the truth, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Again, I tell you that if two of you on earth agree about anything you ask for, it will be done for you by my Father in heaven. For where two or three come together in my name, I am with them. Okay, I got to be honest with you about, I want to always be honest. Okay. Verse 18, I'm not sure what to do with that. On the one hand, I think I can make a case for the idea that Jesus was talking to the disciples here, so that this promise is not a universal promise to every believer in all times and all places. And yet, Matthew doesn't give us that as a clear indication. In other words, Jesus apparently, when he told the parable of the lost sheep, and then he went on to talk about the brother who sins against us, he rolled through that, and Jesus was speaking this to his disciples, his followers. I don't think, if you look all the way back to the beginning of chapter 18, the context is not universal, because Jesus is speaking to the disciples. Now this, yes, could be in the generic sense disciple, followers of Jesus, and even those curious enough to follow him. Or often through the Gospels, the term apostles and disciples are interchangeable. All right, so now I've clouded the water sufficiently to say I'm not sure that I can take verse 18 as a word or a promise for me, Steve, as an individual, a follower of Jesus, but nowhere near an apostle. I tell you the truth. All right, this is not like just some offhanded comment. Jesus identifies the truth. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. So, what kinds of things is Jesus talking about there? In the biblical context, from the Old Testament, which for the Jew was the Bible, for us, the Older Testament, to bind something, it required an oath, a covenant, a strong, maybe it's even fair for me to say the strongest of promises. Whatever you bind on earth by covenant, by promise, by oath, will be bound in heaven. And whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. How would you loose a binding promise? Well, okay. If I'm the one making the promise, I don't get the right to loose that promise. But if I'm being promised to, I can say, no, you're free from that. Okay, are you sufficiently confused? Because if so, I think I'm going to move forward. Because in verse 19, Jesus says, again, I tell you. Now, I think the again there is not so much, I'm telling you for another time, here's one more time I'm telling you this, as much as another truth. I tell you that if two of you on earth agree about anything you ask for, it will be done for you by my Father in heaven. Anybody else see a problem with that? I believe it to be true. And I'm grateful for the fact that when Jesus spoke this, it is a promise and it is true. I don't think it's a promise that I can take for myself the way these disciples to whom Jesus was speaking could. Part of the reason for that is my experience. And it's not just my experience. I don't know anybody who gets everything they ask from God. I don't. In my early ministry life, my 20s and 30s, the phrase name it and claim it became quite popular. And to be honest with you, I don't see it. Okay, I think this is one of the verses that they pulled from to be able to support that idea. I don't see it. There are times when, after the 500th time I've asked of God for a particular thing, and I don't get it, I'm kind of thinking, in my immature moments, I'm thinking, God, snap out of it. You promised me. Well, in my more mature moments, I realize, okay, there's three possible answers that God gives to prayer, and I'm thankful to Kevin Oder who laid this out in a really good sermon. The first answer is yes. There you go. And when that happens, there is much joy, right? Okay. However, I don't want to accuse you of my own sin, but there are times that God said yes, and I was in such a hurry to get to the next thing, I didn't even notice that he had said yes. Okay. Second answer, no. And truly, there are times when a no is the best of the three answers. Usually, when I get a no, I don't see that it's the best at that moment. But in retrospect, I do. I've got a bunch of examples of that from my own personal life. I wanted to be in a ministry in a particular church, and the door just slammed shut. I already had my house on the market. I look back at it now, And I realized that was God protecting me by saying no to what my request was. Had I gone there, there's several factors in it, but the bottom line is the church had a semi-implosion because of leadership gaps and failures. And I would have been right in that mix. As you look at your own life, you can see the times that God said no to protect you. And in my case, that ministry opportunity and invitation, it went away. The door got pretty slam shut. And so one of the reasons was God wanted to protect me from what was ahead in that church. The second reason is I would never have been available to come to Canyon Ridge Christian Church for 13 years, which was one of the most rewarding and transformative personal and ministry experiences in my 50 years of ministry. Amazing. Now, so you got yes, and you have no, and then a third, not yet. When God says yes, I see it pretty much right when he says yes. When he says no, I see it, but I don't understand it until I have some distance from it and can reflect back on it. With not yet, this is a difficult one because not yet almost always feels like no. So what do you do with that? Well, I can only tell you what I do with it. I don't do well. Sorry. I don't have a formula, but I can say this. When there are times when God definitively says no, and okay, but there are other times when I am not getting what I've asked for, but it doesn't feel like no, the door's closed. Probably, maybe, that means God is saying, not yet. Well, to me, this concept fits with what Jesus said, keep on asking, keep on seeking, and keep on knocking. He gives a parable to help kind of illuminate the idea that we continue to ask with perseverance about a pagan judge who didn't care for God or man, but a widow continually came back to him and begged him for justice until finally he said, she is wearing me out, and so I will give her justice. I don't know that God ever feels that. First of all, God cannot be worn out. But I do know there are times when me receiving justice from God's hand was quite a long process and felt very drawn out. Well, so today you might be facing a no or a not yet. This promise was made, in my opinion, to the apostles, not to me or you. And both my experience and contextual examination lead me to that conclusion. So Don't pray? Don't hope for? Don't expect? That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that is, I'll just soften it and say that's probably not a promise for me personally and you personally. So you can chew on that a while, and I'll see you next time on So Care with Stevie Boy.